Shalom family, welcome to another edition of Maccabees TV, and I'm here with my brother Shaahl and my brother Shaahl the Danite, aka Moreh Yeshiah, and we're here just to kick it, after work. We're just having a conversation, so we decided to let the family in on our little bit of conversation. So Moreh Yeshiah, I'm going to begin with you. It's been a crazy week in the Hebrew community. A lot of things have been going on, right? And I've been interviewing a lot of Messianic New Testament Israelites. I haven't had a chance to speak to too many, Torah-centered Israelites. But here you are. So what I want you to do now, from a Torah-centered Israelite's perspective, I want you to speak to some of the misconceptions that are out there amongst the Israelite community concerning Torah-centered Israelites. What are some of the things that we misconstrue about what you guys believe, what you don't believe, so forth and so on?
Giving honor and praise unto Yah, the creator and the maker of heaven and earth. Going to make this brief. Essentially, one of the misconceptions is the concept of saying that, non-Messianic Israelites exist in the first place. The concept of a Messiah is an Old Testament based concept. You first read Mashiach, or from the root word Mashak, to anoint, in Exodus the 28th chapter. So Aaron was anointed, his sons was anointed. When you go in the book of Kings, 2 Kings 1 verse 39, you read about Solomon being anointed. You read about the prophet Elijah anointed Hazael and Yehu and other people. So there were many people who are anointed even in what you call the Old Testament base. So that's on the Old Testament scriptures. So that's one thing to be noted. Another misconception is the fact that some feel that Old Testament based or non-Messianic are Jewish, or we got our thing from the Jewish man. Emphatically no. That is just as wise as saying Messianics got their things from Zwingli or from the Lutheran Church. You understand? So that right there is a pretty biased concept. First off, the word Jew does not even exist in the Hebrew. You understand? Because Judah or Yahuda right there shows you that that's speaking of a particular people. The Hebrew letter Dalet, said by one West Lashon Kodash Hebrew as Da, never drops in Hebrew. So that's why phonetically there can never be a people called a Jew. That's one thing to let that be noted and understood. Tanakh-based Israelites do not deal and subscribe to the Talmud. Talmud is a composition of what you call the Mishnah, which means secondary from the Hebrew root word Shana or Shanei, and then you got the Gemara from the Hebrew root word Gamar, which means to finish or completion. We don't sit there and deal with that. We don't do Mezizah Bapeh. We don't put babies' penises inside of our mouths. We don't have Yom Kippur snacks. We do not sit there and encourage the understanding of what they call a bar mitzvah, because bar in Aramaic means son. Mitzvah means commandment. So when they have their bar mitzvah saying he's the son of the commandment, that right there goes to show you it's not of the Torah, because you teach your children diligently before the age of 13. So we don't have the concept of a bar mitzvah. That's another thing to be noted. Secondly, the Apocrypha, a book that was taken out by the Catholic Church between the Old and New Testament times, Hebrew Israelites that are non-Messianic do observe the days such as Purim that you read of in Esther. We do celebrate the times of Chanukah, which you do read of, and so forth and so on. So those are just some of the misconceptions that has been presented. So I just wanted to let that be noted and understood. Ancient Hebrew had 22 letters. That's another thing real quick. And in those 22 letters, there is no V, there is no Kaf and Kaf, and there is no Kaf Sofit, Mem Sofit, Nu Sofit, Fe Sofit, Zadeh Sofit. The Sofit letters are not there. When you go even in Psalms 119, all 22 Hebrew letter characters are there. Also, there is no Shin and Sin. It's just a sh, like Shalom sound. So those are just some things to let it be noted off top that no, we're not Jewish and we did not get our thing from the Jewish man. The Jewish man concerning the New Testament will sit there and tell you, based upon some ideology, that Yeshua of the New Testament is boiling in a big bowl or pot of excrement or semen. We do not teach that. You understand? So that's certain things to be noted and understood on that point.
Right. So now I have a question for you, right? Because this is something that you and I speak about behind the scenes, and a few other brothers, right? The perception is out there, even especially from people outside of the Hebrew community, that all Tanakh-based Israelites believe that Christ is a myth, that he never really existed in the flesh as a man that walked the earth. Is that a fair assessment of all Tanakh-based Israelites? Because I hear that a lot.
Not all. Some do teach that, but not all. And this is something I want to sit there and state from the camp that I originally came out of. My first teacher, may he rest in peace, was Moreh ben Ephraim. Now, he was the direct student of Rabbi Yirmiyahu, who was a member of the Commandment Keepers, who was a direct student of Rabbi Matthews. So Rabbi Matthews taught Rabbi Yirmiyahu, who taught Moreh Yosef, who taught my mom, who taught me. Okay, so just want to let that be noted and understood. My first teaching concerning the New Testament is that Yeshua, who some call ignorantly Jesus Christ, was a person who lived, was assassinated or killed because he went against the teachings of what the Romans was trying to present. And in time, people wanting to sit there and believe upon him deified him to a certain extent. So that is the teaching that I personally came up under, being raised inside of a Tanakh-based camp. So that's something to be noted and understood upon that premise. As far as saying somebody did not exist in history, that right there is emphatically incorrect, because you got Josephus that speaks about the person, you got Centenius that speak about the person we're talking about, and there are other historians that actually speak about the person whom we're speaking about. Now, do we sit there and say that he is a God sent? Do we say that he was born of a virgin? No. Do we say that he died for the nation of Israel's sins? No. And that's some of the distinctions that happen to come into play. Do we pray in the name of anyone else? No. We pray directly to the God of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So that's something to be noted. Also, to say that somebody didn't exist real quick is a very flimsy, non-scholarly thing that when you just don't want to do the research upon something, oh, they never existed. That's all that is. People said that one time Sargon the second didn't exist. Come on, stop that.
Right, okay. And my last question before we get into the main topic is this, right? I want you to speak a little bit to your history as an Israelite. You know, just really briefly, nothing too long. I know that you've been a part of several camps, and I know that you met One West real early. And, you know, in the day, you know, you tell me the story all the time about your encounters with One West in 1993. You know, so you've been knowing all the camps, New Testament and Old Testament camps, more than 20 years, you know. So speak a little bit to you know, to your experience with the One West camps, because it seems to me that there's a war against the One West camps by some Israelites, that they want to destroy that whole foundation, you know. And you being a Torah Center brother is not one of those brothers that, you know, that has that mindset. So speak a little bit briefly about that, and then we're going to get right into what we came here to talk about.
All right, not taking nothing from your question, but all camps have taught something that needed to be revised. You understand? So that's something real hands down as far as that's concerned. There was an Old Testament camp that was teaching that Hanukkah is a Jewish Christmas. Obviously, that person never read Maccabees 5. So that's something to be noted and understood on that point. Now, not throwing stones or nothing. I started in the camp at Stated Kosherit, founded in 1970. From 1982, went there to 1990, went to Beni Adat, located in Brooklyn. Left there only because of the simple fact of location and where we was able to travel and save time going out on Shabbat. We went to a place called Hashaba, which is located in Queens at the time, now located in the southern states. After Hashaba closed, before they moved, went back to Beni Adat. They had a very unified form, but a lot of Israelites wound up migrating, if you want to use that term, Charlotte, where Hashaba now presently is at. My teachers coming out of Hashaba, like Cohen Lewi, Kohen Mikael, these are teachers that I love and admire to a great extent. As far as, you know, that's concerned with that particular aspect. Now, One West, I first encountered them in 1989, actually, when I was walking, may she rest in peace, with my mother. And she was sitting up there saying, those guys over there with the trench coats and the turbans on their head, they have a whole tribal chart thing and they don't have the Danites. So I was like, oh, okay, well, that's a different understanding. So from that, we wound up turning the corner there. I wound up meeting them again in 1993 on my own volition and seeing them teaching. They gave me a flyer. I studied it, I looked into it, and I understood a lot of the points that was being presented and made. Now, as far as that's concerned with that, the concept of some people who want to sit there and say they want to destroy the One West thing and that and the third, are also the same ones who would never tell you they want to big up the Tanakh camps either. They wanted to destroy the One West, or Israelites who just want to present and destroy Israel's roots in something. You're not trying to help your brother, okay, saying this teaching may be incorrect, let's work on this, let's work on that. You just want to sit there and wipe something off the face of the earth because you have a concept like Esau in Psalm 83 that says, let the name of Israel no longer be in remembrance. So that's the point and the premise as far as that is concerned. I have much respect for the brothers that branch out from One West, yourself, Lions of Israel, Pawar, Ashar, AOC, my brother Shaahl right here, known his brother personally since 2006. You understand what I'm saying? So I have no animosity toward that. Unfortunately, not taking nothing from your question, a lot of Messianics look at Tanakh-based or Torah-based Israelites, yo, y'all do this fake. Because if you're saying you want to walk the Torah, then you got to sit there and represent it. And unfortunately, some who bash the New Testament and say they enter the Tanakh or Old Testament only don't support the laws of Leviticus 19.
Right, kind. All right. You want to add anything to that, Shaahl, before we get into the main thing?
Yeah, first of all, I would like to give all praises to the Most High, Adonai Elyon El Shaddai, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the power of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Like, just to land me back off of some of the things that the brother was saying, you have certain men that's running around in Israel. We all know who they are. They say all type of things with regards to Yeshiah. Sometimes they say he exists. Sometimes they say he didn't exist. And when you really analyze this whole thing, a lot of times you have to analyze what angle brothers are really coming from. Because if you're saying he didn't, it's either you saying he didn't exist or he did exist. If he didn't exist, based on you're saying that there's too much mythology involved in his life, then you got to really understand what type of brother this is that's saying something like this. Because, I mean, how could you say there's too much mythology involved in Christ's life, or what we refer to as the supernatural, and then you ignore all the supernatural things that happen in the Old Testament? This makes absolutely no sense. Are you telling me that the ass didn't really speak to Balaam? I mean, this is in the Torah. You say your Torah based, that according to the scripture, it was a supernatural event, and this particular occurrence actually happened. Are you saying the sun really didn't stop with Joshua when the Most High made them fight a war? Are you saying those things didn't happen? Are you saying that Moses didn't really split the Red Sea? So you see where I'm coming from? So I don't really understand when he's saying they don't understand too much about the mythology, this, that, and the third. It's not mythology, it's supernatural events that the Most High made occur. So if you're going to say that you don't believe in Christ solely on the premise that there was too much mythology or too many supernatural things happening in his life, then you would have to discard all the other supernatural events that occurred in the Old Testament. So I'm really trying to understand the angle that these guys coming from, because a lot of times they make statements and they don't really know how stupid they're making themselves sound or look.
Right, Kane, no doubt, no doubt. All right, brother, so that's pretty much it on that. So now let's get down to the festivities, shall we? This upcoming weekend, which I'm going to put this up, Lord's will, tomorrow. Today is Tuesday night. They're having this event called the Kemetic War Conference, right? And since the Kemetic side likes to talk about Israelites so much, I think that we should spend some more time talking about them, all right? Now, what I want to ask you, brothers, is a very simple question, right? When we look at all the monuments in Kemet, when we look at all the stelas in Kemet, when we look at all the papyruses that were found in Kemet, let's start with the monuments and the stelas. For the most part, the monuments and the stelas are monuments and stelas to different individuals that were in Kemet, whether they were kings or queens or so forth and so on, but they really don't tell the Kemetic history as to what happened everyday Kemetic life. How do we know the histories of Kemet? Because you have people out there saying that we know the history of Kemet through Manetho, and we know the history of Kemet through guys like hold on a second, now I lost my train of thought.
Sir Alan Gardner?
No. We know the history of Kemet mainly through Manetho. That's how we know the history of Kemet, basically through Manetho and Herodotus. That's what I wanted to say. We know the history of Kemet through Manetho and Herodotus. That's how we know about what happened in everyday life. How do we know Kemetic history? Where are we getting it from? Are we getting it from the stelas? Are we getting it from the different monuments that were built? Or are we getting it from so-called white people, Greeks?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. That's a very good question. Actually, and you're right. That's the vast majority of the information that's coming down about Egypt or ancient Kemet as we know it, or as we like to call it, is basically coming from ancient Greek historians or European historians. And basically what you're getting is regurgitations. And what I mean by that is they didn't never translate the hieroglyphs. So when they say they translated the hieroglyphs under Champollion and all that other garbage, it's all lies. That never happened. Because the hieroglyphs, wasn't nobody reading hieroglyphs up until 396 AD. Because remember, when you go back into history, Theodosius I, the Roman emperor, he outlawed all 9 Christian religions throughout the empire. And at that particular time, when Theodosius I was ruling over Rome, Egypt was under Rome's dominion at that particular time. And in 396, he outlawed all 9 Christian temples. So from that point on, everybody was not able to read the hieroglyphs or anything like that, because the priests in Egypt, if they was found reading it or whatever, they'd be put to death by pain of punishment. The punishment was a capital punishment if they found them dealing with anything outside of Christianity. So here we got from 396 all the way up to 1822, when they finally translated, when he supposedly translated the tablets. You're dealing with over 1400 years of information that has been completely wiped out. There was nobody around. In fact, up into the 4th century AD, there was the reading of hieroglyphs had been abolished way back then, up into the 4th century. Nobody could, and the vast majority of the Egyptians or the Coptics, they couldn't even read their own language. They were illiterates. So how could they tell you what the inscriptions are saying? If anything, the vast majority of the information that you're getting with regards to the hieroglyphs or anything about Egyptian life, Egyptian culture, be it economically, socially, you're getting it from Greek historians, the vast majority of Greek historians and outside historians that came into the land, and they were the ones that codified a whole lot of stuff and broke it down in the Greek language. For example, you had Demetrius of Alexandria. He was a Jew from Alexandria that broke down a whole lot of information. And this particular information was taken by Josephus. And Josephus copied from Demetrius of Alexandria, which was a Jew that lived in Alexandria, a Hellenist Jew. And he was the one that copied a whole lot of information that went on in ancient Egypt, passed down from Herodotus, Demetrius, so on and so forth, Apion, and all these other people. So the vast majority, like you said, of the information that's coming down to us about Egypt and with regards to Egypt is coming from Greek historians and Hellenist historians. And when I say Hellenists, I'm not talking about the white people. I'm talking about the Jews that lived in Alexandria, Egypt. That's who I'm talking about. But with regards to them going and reading a hieroglyph and all that other stuff, that ain't nothing but pseudo science, pseudo information, created information. It ain't real information. They passing it off as real information and got people believing that they read hieroglyphs and they never read anything. In fact, they had problems with the classical Greek. And how could you read something when it was fragmented? When they found the Rosetta Stone in 1799, it was fragmented. Right. And then they didn't know whether you read from left to right, from up or down, or how to read the thing. So this myth that they translated the tablets is the Rosetta Stone, and that's how they came up with getting the information about ancient Egypt. It's all a myth. And not only that, first of all, the ancient hieroglyphic language was not a regular language, spoken language with sounds, with phonetic sounds as we speak. So, for example, in English, you got letters, you got consonants that makes a sound. The ancient Egyptian language, or hieroglyphic language, was a symbol language. And there's no way in hell they were going to be able to reconstruct something that was completely dead for over 1,400 years. Okay. It's impossible. It wasn't happening, and it wasn't going to happen. So this stuff about them translating the hieroglyphs is all lies. Right. And like you said, it all came down from ancient Hellenists and Greek historians. The vast majority of information that we're getting about Kemet or Egypt is coming from them. Everything else is Eurocentric regurgitations. That's it.
Right. Sir Alan Gardner said that all that's left out of Egypt is rags and tatters. That's what he said. Now I want to ask you the same question, Moreh. We have a lot of people spending thousands of dollars going over to Egypt to be initiated into the craft of Amun-Ra, and they go and they stand before the pyramids and the walls in Egypt, and they think that they're looking at Egyptian history, as I stated, not realizing that a lot of stuff on the walls is actually not telling you Egyptian history at all, but are more monuments to different individuals in Egypt. So, same question I asked Brother Shaahl, I'm going to ask you. Where are we getting this Egyptian history from? Who is giving it to us?
To land back what the Brother Shaahl said, giving honor and praise to Yah, creator and maker of heaven and earth. A lot of the information that came through into people, as the brother stated, came from outside sources. You understand? For instance, in 1896, when they said they found what they called the Meneptah Stela. Now, on the opposite side of the Meneptah Stela, you have it to where there were Amenhotep III. So now you got Egyptian pharaohs writing their names on other people's monuments. Because as stated before, each pharaoh was thought to be the incarnation of Heru or Horus. So whatever one pharaoh did could be ascribed to another pharaoh. Because it's not you, it's Heru in you doing the act. So if Amenhotep III could do something, then so can Ramses II, so can Merneptah, so can Amasis II, and so can Nectabo. Because you have it to where they felt that they was the incarnation of a god. That's why to understand their spiritual system and then try to put it in historical context, it's kind of difficult because each pharaoh might have claimed something else that somebody else did. Now, as far as that goes down with that, what a lot of people also neglect is the chronology aspect we went over before on Maccabees TV.
Let's do it again. Let's do it again.
You had three intermediate periods. You had Dynasty 7 through 10. That's an intermediate period. Then you had Dynasty 13 to 17. That's an intermediate period. Then you had Dynasty part of 21 all the way to part of 25. That's the third intermediate period. And this is why they have clashes, because you had certain priests ruling in Thebes and Waset in southern Egypt, and the people that was in northern Egypt and Sais or Sais that was also ruling. So now you had which one did what. Ancient Egypt, as stated on the South Showtime show, did not write record for the world. They wrote their own record for their own selves, and they understood their own particular culture. You understand? So when you're trying to fit the whole world into their kind of thing, it's actually incorrect. You have the Saqqara list of kings, the Abydos list of the kings. You got the Saqqara, Abydos, the Royal Total Papyrus of Ramses III, and prior to that, you got what they call the record of Palermo king list. So you got different kings lists, and some of them don't include who they don't like. You understand? Who they call Akhenaten is not included in all of that. So how do you have it to where you want to sit there and now come at the Israelites talking about, oh, y'all don't have your own record straight, claiming Kemet when Kemet did not claim all black people. You understand? So when you look at the pictures in Ramses III and the Temple of Karnak of the Amu, or the captured people from the Asiatic lands all the way down to the Aegean people who are of color, actually, when you get right down into it, you got to ask yourself, black man, woman, and child, from Jamaica, Queens to Jamaica, Kingston, you got to ask yourself, would have you been considered part of the Egyptian people, or would you be considered part of the Setu, the Amu, the Haiku Soswet, or the Retenu, or the Kor? Would you be considered part of the foreigners or part of the homeborn? And if you're part of the foreigners, that means you're no different than a Khazarian Jew claiming the tribe of Judah. You made a religion out of somebody else's culture.
Right. Excellent. Okay, no problem. Now, speaking of chronology, really quickly before we go on to the next question, right? I heard one of the participants on this so-called Kemetic conference talking about he's going to take the people back 20,000 years, history from 20,000 years ago. Yet, as we all study history, we find out, as Alan Gardner said again, all that's left of Kemet is rags and tatters. And then there's problems with chronology up and down Egypt. You have dynasties listed sequentially when a lot of them ruled at the same time. We also have some of those same problems when we're dealing with Sumerian history as well. There's only fragmented history. And this history is not 20,000 years ago, but only about 5,000 years ago. So, how is it that an individual is going to go back 20,000 years and teach history when they can't even teach you the history that happened 5,000 years ago accurately? And they're not being honest. They're romanticizing. They're not being 100% honest. So I ask you, Brother Shaahl.
Basically,
Well, real quick, I want to give you my question, and you can piggyback off what I said, right? Okay. I want to give you my question. My question to you is this. Is the dating system that we are given, not by the white scholars, because we have black scholars that give us dates in Kemet as well, is the dating system that we are given by black scholars, is that accurate?
Is the dating? No. How could the dating system by black scholars be accurate when the black scholars regurgitating what they got from the European scholars? That's impossible. It just makes absolutely no sense.
So are you saying that Dr. Ben went to a white university? And Ivan Van Sertova went to a white university?
Well, some of them have went to white universities, and some of them haven't gone to universities at all. Some of them had degrees given to them, honorary degrees. When you go and do your research, you find that out. For instance, John Henry Clark was given an honorary degree. A lot of these guys didn't really graduate from college, but this is something in the so-called conscious community that they hate to even talk about. It is something that they try to veer away from because they don't want to be embarrassed by these type of things. I mean, here it is. You have people or what you call black scholars that would tell you the reason why black people fell in Africa is simply because they were too welcoming, they were too nice to people, and this is how the white man was able to come into Africa and take us down. So then, if I go by that logic, if I go by the logic that we fell because we were too welcoming and everybody else, we was letting everybody be our friends, then we would have to admit as black people that the white man was smarter, he was more cunning, and he was able and stronger, and he was able to take us down that way, if I follow your logic. But our logic tells us that a higher power and a higher source took us down. It makes more sense for us to tell you that God took us down as opposed to we was just too welcoming. And then it don't make no damn sense historically. How in the hell we go from being Hannibal, a black man, defeating Roman armies, having many battles and winning these battles, go from being Zulus and all these different African nations, from winning battles against Europeans, be it the British or the French or what have you, and then we go into sleep when it comes to them coming to take us in captivity. That just makes absolutely no damn sense at all. But here we have a man or one of your scholars, this is what they taught. This is what these scholars taught. When you're talking about a John Henry Clark. So, like I said, if we're gonna say that black people fell simply because we was too welcoming and too happy with everybody, then you would have to admit that they were stronger, more cunning, and more and able to take us down based on that premise, and not the other premise like y'all be trying to say.
Right. Now, I remember when we were speaking a couple of weeks ago, you and I were talking about the Narma palette, right? Okay. If I'm mistaken, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. You said the name Narma does not appear on the Narma palette.
No.
So, where do they get that name from? Just go in on it, brother. Explain that.
The Narma pilot, first of all, they call it the Narma pilot. Basically, it came from Manetho. Manetho came up with all the king's list or what have you. But the point that I was making is they're saying it's Narma, but there's nowhere written in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs or anything else or Demotic on the pilot where it says it was dedicated to Narma. So for all we know, it could have been dedicated to any pharaoh. There's nowhere where it's written at. So it's just something, it was a concoction like most of the things that the conscious community make up. Or I can't even say conscious community in this particular event. I don't even say based on what the Europeans handed down to them. And once again, they just give the regurgitation, the Eurocentric regurgitation.
Right. Okay. So Moreh, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked you all a minute ago. You didn't get a chance to go in on it. So the question I want to ask you is, has the Medu Neter in your study actually really been deciphered?
No. And so when...
Because sorry to cut you off, because that's going to be one of the big arguments coming up at this so-called Kemetic conference. You have one side where you have Sarasut and Seti and others that are saying Medu Neter has not been deciphered. But then...
Let me speak to this, man. Because, you know, it's funny how now they're saying that the Medu Neter never was deciphered or what have you, but had Sinetta never edited the video, the people wouldn't be knowing right now that I said that a long time ago, that they never deciphered the Medu Neter. But that's the part that y'all didn't hear about. I was making a point a long time ago that they never deciphered the Medu Neter. You had plenty of different Euro scholars that came throughout history and claimed that they translated the Rosetta Stone or the inscriptions. It never happened. I was saying this from day one, like I've said before. When we go back into history, all the churches that were non-Christian were outlawed in Egypt in 396 AD under Theodosius I of Rome. He outlawed it. And the priests of On, or the order of the priests of On, was outlawed from that particular point as well. And so therefore, anybody that was caught reading in hieroglyphs or writing hieroglyphs, they were punished by penalty of death. They got capital punishment. So like I said before, they never translated the hieroglyphs. Only thing you're getting is Eurocentric regurgitations. You had Athanasius in the 17th century. He supposed to be tried to translate it. It didn't work. You had Harapolo. He tried to translate it. It didn't work. You had Misri, the Arab historians that tried to translate it during the 9th and 10th century AD, and it didn't work.
Go in.
So when you saying that the hieroglyphs, and mind you, these are people that were historians or scholars that were far closer to the times back then. So now you're gonna tell me, come the 18th century, 19th century, all these Europeans, they suddenly translate the hieroglyphs? And then if you're gonna talk about Champollion, you're right, Champollion didn't even translate anything simply because he just worked off of what Thomas Young gave him. Thomas Young was another Euro scholar that was trying to translate the hieroglyphs, and he failed miserably. And so he handed it over to Champollion in 1814, and then finally in 1822, he's supposed to be translated the tablets. But it's all lies, and when you go and do the history, you find out that they couldn't even, like I said before, they couldn't even translate the classical Greek. They still was having problems with what the classical Greek was exactly what it was saying. And my question is this: if they found the Rosetta Stone in 1799, and you supposedly deciphered the classical Greek in 1803, why did it take you 20 some odd years later, if you're claiming that you was able to translate the Rosetta Stone solely on the premise that you read whatever it said in classical Greek and you compared the two or the three, and that's how you was able to come up and translate it? But why did it take so damn long? 20 some odd years just don't make no sense. Only thing you're dealing with is guesswork, pseudo regurgitations, and grandiloquent and magniloquent nonsense.
Right. So here's the problem. Here's the problem that I have as somebody being objective, Moreh, right? You know, you Israelites, you guys talk a lot of stuff, but you plagiarize from Kemet. Because Kemet has a creation story. Very similar to the Hebrew creation story. Kemet has a flood account. So do other surrounding societies in the Nile Valley have flood accounts. So the Hebrews have been stealing from Kemet for years. Then, of course, we know that there's Ma'at, the laws of Ma'at. We know that you guys stole from Ma'at. So you guys have just been plagiarizing everything. Why would you plagiarize when you can just deal with the original? Why not just go to the source? Speak on that, Moreh.
All right, first and foremost, giving honor and praise to Yah. Let me talk about the whole plagiarism thing. And I say this as a person who teaches inside of a school. When you say somebody plagiarized something, you have to be able to prove that somebody plagiarized something. So that's very important to be noted. You just can't make the allegation and say, oh, somebody plagiarized something. Then you got to understand the definition of what plagiarism is. That's taking the thoughts or the words or the ideas of somebody else without giving them the credit for it. That's what plagiarism is. Okay. So now you have to show the difference between plagiarism and parallel understanding. That's a very big thing. This is collegiate stuff we're talking about now. Parallel understanding is Sumeria has a flood story. The Zuni tribe among the natives have a flood story. Assyria has a flood story. Babylon has a flood story. The Hebrews have a flood story. The people in the Congo have a flood story. The Zulu have a flood story. China has a flood story. Did the people in China plagiarize from Assyria? Did the people in Babylon plagiarize from Egypt? No. So what it is, basically, it's attack upon the Bible. And that's really all that it is. You understand? Because if you got 8 different people telling somebody a similar story, they may have some kind of accurate information concerning that. When the police interrogate somebody or people, they put one in one room, one in another room, and then they sit there and compare the stories. And that's how they're able to sit there and try to gain information. What the so-called conscious community has done is they do not sit there and take the time out to realize that everything is not Egypt, and Egypt was not the be-all and all. Furthermore, ancient Egypt flood stories is more than one, because the only time they would have had a flood story would have been with the overflow of the Nile. The other floods throughout the world stories did not come from the overflow of the river beneath them. It came from the sky above them. So that's something to be noted as far as that is concerned. Now, the other aspect concerning plagiarism of laws. The understanding of the Torah, like the prophet Moshe or Moses said, there is no law like this among the peoples of the world. And for people who think that the Bible came to us through the white man, I got to ask you this. When you go to Deuteronomy 23, verse 15 and 17, it says, if you return a runaway slave, that's a sin against you. In North Carolina, you didn't return a runaway slave, you might get locked up. You understand? So the scriptures did not come from the European man. So let that be noted and understood. Since when in history did the translator become the author? Never.
Right.
You understand? So that's something to be pointed out. Next thing is that when you read about the rites, R-I-T-E-S, the ceremonies, if you can show where the Shabbat, where you can show where New Moon, where you can show where the Pesach or the Passover or even Chanukah can even come from and derive from the history of the ancient Egyptians, I need you to show me that, because ancient Kemet had a 10-day week. Exodus 20 tells you emphatically 6 days the Most High created the heavens and the earth, but Yom HaShbi'i Yishbot, and he rested or ceased from his work, which Elohim in creating had made. So how in the world you going to sit there and say that such is a thing? Now, a creation story in Egypt, you got different ones. You got the Atum one. I ain't going there because my daughter may see it because it's disgusting. You understand? Then you got the one with Gab, that creation story. Then you got the creation story with Ptah. Then you got the creation story with Kenum over in Elephantine or Yeb. So we have to know and understand, brothers and sisters, that ancient Egypt had at least 3 or 4, if not more, creation stories. So did they plagiarize all from its own? Now, if I'm saying and looking at the world around me and saying, wow, the sky's there, the earth is here, and it's separated by air, that doesn't mean I plagiarized from the Hebrews or the Egyptians. I'm just describing it to the best of my ability.
Right. Now, I want to say this real quick on the plagiarism thing, and then we can move on. It's very easy. When you go to a court of law, right, if you want to say that somebody plagiarized your book or somebody plagiarized your song, right, on a common sense level, what must you prove to the court? You must prove to the court proof of authorship, meaning that song or that book originated with you and didn't predate you. Now, the so-called conscious community will tell you in a minute that there were civilizations that predated Kemet. And those civilizations had creation stories. So therefore, if you are not the author of a creation story, you simply just had one of many that preceded you, how the hell is somebody plagiarize off you? Because the very definition of plagiarism in court is you must prove you are the originator, the author of a story. And there's nothing in Kemet that Kemet originated because there were civilizations before them. So that's easy, that's light work.
Right. And just to add to what the brother was saying, it's only natural that all civilizations had a flood story, because after the flood, when Noah came out of the ship, everybody forget when you go back to Genesis 9 and 8 that the Most High said he was going to establish a covenant with Noah and his sons. Wabini. And his sons. So they always leave that out. So from Noah and his sons on down, all the nations, when they scattered and went out throughout all the different nations and settled in their lands, they all took the story of the flood with them. And and throughout the process of time, the story had changed. So it's only natural that all the nations had a flood story. Right. And since Israel is the youngest nation on the planet Earth, quite naturally, they will get other stories from other nations. But does that mean they plagiarize? I'm not even gonna try to dignify that. That just makes absolutely no sense.
Right. It doesn't make any sense. All right, so let's move on to the next question that I have for you, scholarly brothers, when it comes to now the Most High God, right? We're told that, again, dealing with ancient Kemet, that amongst all the Netcher or Netter, there was always a female counterpart to each one of the gods. So that presented balance. But we're told that when we deal with the Bible, we only have the Most High. They always ask us, where is his female counterpart? So that's question A. Why does the Most High not have a female counterpart? Then I have a question B. Any of you brothers that want to take that, feel free.
First of all, I'm not going to dignify that so much. I'm just going to go to Exodus 15:3. The Most High tell you he's a man of war, and the Lord is his name. Adonai Elyon El Shaddai is a man of war, and that's what the Bible says. With regards to a feminine counterpart, we're not going to deal with that. I'm not even going to try to dignify that. The Most High tell you he's a man. Whether he has a feminine counterpart or what have you, that's his business. But as far as when we read our records and our scriptures, it tells us nothing about a feminine deity,
right?
Or the Israelites worshiping or deifying the female principle. That never happened.
Right, because when you read, let me just
honor and respect the female principle, but we never deified the female.
Go ahead, go in on that, and let me just add this one little caveat in while you're answering. Right, all the gods of these so-called ancient African civilizations, the top gods was always females. So that's something else that they throw in, but go ahead.
one of the things to be pointed out, maybe I could stand to be corrected, but the top Egyptian god is a masculine one, what they call Re or Amun Re or so forth and so on. In the creation stories, correct me if I'm wrong, there is no female creation goddess inside of ancient Egypt. That's one thing. Another misconception that the conscious community present is that the white man got rid of the concept of the goddess. But yet when you read about the Greeks and the Romans, you read about Aphrodite, you read about Diana.
Right.
So that right there just goes to show you that that concept is actually pretty foreign. Ancient Israel was commanded to have what we will call today a monotheistic concept. That is the concept of the belief of one Elohim or one power or one God. So that's one thing to be noted. When you go to Isaiah 46, the Most High said, who will you compare me to make me equal to?
Right.
So that's something to be noted and understood. None of the gods of these nations ever said anything and it came to pass. You understand? When you go inside of ancient Egypt, what they call the temple of Soleb or the temple of West Amara, you read about the Yahweh of the Shasu. You understand? Why is it that Yahweh, Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh, the Most High, the God of Israel, is considered by the ancient Egyptians as an enemy God? Because of what Yah did unto the ancient Egyptians in bringing the Magefot or the plagues, recorded even by Emperor. You understand? So that's something to be noted and understood. Now, another thing, when people try to say, oh, well, ancient Egyptians were careful writers of their records, and we don't see this, that, or the third. Why is Emperor saying that scribes are killed and their writings are taken away? That question has never been answered. Another thing is, if you're saying somebody plagiarized something, you're going to have to, as the brother stated, yourself actually stated, you got to prove proof of ownership. And if you're saying the Israelites never existed in one breath, then you're saying they plagiarized in the other breath, you got a problem. Okay, so that's something as far as that's concerned to be noted and understood. Now, the concept of saying that all of the creation gods of the African people of the feminine as the grand deity and everything like that, that just go to show you how they flip-flop between Kemet or ancient Egypt and Africa as a whole. And I call it the Kemet train. Wherever you can sit there and have for the moment, Kemet works okay. Let's go to Nok, let's go to the Twa, let's go to Kush, let's go to this, let's go to that, wherever it works for the moment. So therefore, as the brother Shaahl stated, you're given a romanticized pseudo actually kind of concept wherever it fits in well with you. Why is it that nobody claiming Africa is great in that? Why are you not claiming the Surai or the Sui people who drink cow's blood in the morning? Why are you downing the Igbo when they say that they're the Hebrews?
Okay.
Why are you downing the Ashanti when they say that they're Hebrews? Okay. Why are you downing the Bantu that say they come from the tribe of Judah? Why are you saying it's impossible for the Falasha to be of the tribe of Dan? But yet, at the same token, you want to keep on trying to push and promote the idea Africa this and Africa that, but you don't want to be the people who do the female circumcision. You don't want to be the people who put their heads inside the camel's behind, or cow's behind, pardon me. You don't want to be the people who put the plates in their lip, but you want to be the people who was great. That's how you know it's romanticized.
Right.
You don't want to be Kemun Hotep, and you don't want to be Sobek himself. Sobek himself got locked up for digging into the tombs. But yet you okay with the European, the slave master digging into the tombs, and then going to ask Israelites over and over, well, where's your bodies? We are the children of Israel. I am evidence that my father existed, fool. You understand? So that's something to be noted and understood. My little daughter that I call Bobo as a nickname, she's evidence that I exist. The children represent you, but they don't have the Yisrael, Yisra meaning of the future tense. They don't have the futuristic concept. The Most High in Ezekiel tells us what will happen with Israel. Ephraim, write a stick there, Ezekiel. In Yehuda, write a stick there, and the two sticks will become one in your hand. They ain't got Tomeri and Tamehu on the walls of Egypt saying they're going to be united to Simatawi again. So therefore, you have to now, running from the Most High, jump into anything that you want to sit there and consider to be black. Now, to show you the foolishness too, no offense intended, but it's going to come pretty war. Remember when Tupac, may he rest in peace, was saying that Mobb Deep should have never tried to beef with him because you're jumping in 50 cents and this beef and that beef and other rappers beef and everything of that sort. That's the same thing going on now. If you're saying you want to be the ancient people of Egypt, but yet you want to sit there and hate on the Asiatics, but if you're not the true people of Egypt, then how can you say that you're also not part of the original Asiatic black man? So that's something to be noted and understood. If you remember, pardon me for the, I got to make the correction real quick, because 50 Cent came out after Tupac's death. But if you remember, Tupac said emphatically, why is it that Mobb Deep is taking a beef that had nothing to do with them in the first place? So if you want to sit there and pimp Egypt, you making beef with the house of Israel that has nothing to do with you in the first place.
Right.
Know where you stand at. Stop hopping all over the place.
Okay.
Girls play hopscotch.
Okay.
Men shouldn't do that.
Okay, and just to add to what the brother was saying, and also if you're saying that you're ancient Kemites or that you are the ancient Egyptians or that you're from the ancient Egyptian bloodline, then where is the repatriation plan? When are you going to repatriate back to your land? What type of plan do you have to repatriate back to your land? You have no plan. The only thing they want to do is get people together, go down to Egypt, look at a few monuments, and violate your own 42 principles. Because one of the principles in the 42 principles of my act was for you not to violate the dead. And that's what y'all constantly doing.
That's right.
So if you're gonna talk about Egypt or talk about Mitzrayim or whatever, you should have a repatriation plan like Israelites had from Chicago. They went down there and they lived in Israel and the land. It ain't something that they talked about. It ain't something that they went to visit. It's something that they do.
All praise to the Most High. Yeah, that was it, Shaahl. That was fire right there, brother. That was it. So listen, man, time is winding down. I don't want to keep you brothers out here too long. It's getting a little chilly out here too, man.
I'm gonna get a few more pointers in there, man.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of different things that people be saying.
Well, here it is. I was about to set you up, brother. I was about to set you up, man. I'm about to set you up, man. So open-ended question. All right. So now, you are at the Kemetic War Conference, and they pass you the mic, and they be like, Brother Shaahl, you say you have a question for the panel. Give me a question. What is it that you want to ask those guys historically about Kemet? Good, bad, in between. What do you want to ask them?
Well, one of the things I would ask right off the bat, which is one of the statements that Unc the Flying Water Bug Killer said when we was having our little street battle, so-called debate that they edited the hell out and chopped up. As you know, you was there. One of the things that I would ask them, because one of the questions that I asked when we was having that battle is, y'all still claim that the language is still down in Africa, the Kemetic language or the language that the ancient Egyptians spoke or the people from Kemet spoke. You say that it's still down into the interiors of Africa, scattered all throughout Africa. So if that was the case, you mean to tell me that y'all have to be some dumb ass individuals simply because if the language is still down in the interiors of Africa, you should be up in Egypt making some money by reading the hieroglyphs and stop allowing white people to read the hieroglyphs or translate the hieroglyphs. Where are the Africans that went to Africa to Egypt? Where are the Africans that went to Egypt? Since you're saying they still speak the language, where are they at? Why aren't they up in Kemet translating the hieroglyphs? Shit, they would be millionaires by now if they really spoke the language. The reason why you're saying that is because you're trying to make them look good, when in reality they don't speak a damn thing. The language is dead the same way y'all dead, and that's why you call your book the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and rightly so, the Egyptian Book of the Dead Heads.
Right. You Moreh.
Yes, sir.
What would you ask?
I will ask them at the Kemet, what's the thing called again?
Kemetic Armageddon Conference, which, by the way, the name Armageddon is very ironic because that's not a Kemetic word.
No, it's not.
But anyway, what would you ask?
I will ask them a question that I've been asking, and it's not to be redundant. Did the children of Israel exist? And if they did exist, can you please explain why is it that in Elephantine Island, they have what they call the Elephantine Papyrus of the Elephantine Jews that were there, and the Passover Papyrus, dated all the way from Dynasty 26 and into Dynasty 27. How do you explain that, dating to the era of the 6th and the 5th century BCE, but Ashwa Kwesi is saying that the Bible came out of the Council of Jamnia in 90 AD, but they're keeping Passover, which is in Leviticus, the 23rd chapter, in the 5th century BCE. That's never been answered.
Okay, excellent. Shaahl, you said there's plenty of things that's out there, so question number 2.
One of the questions that they put forward to Israelites, they said, well, in Genesis, how could there be light? How could there be light when the sun, in the beginning, when the sun wasn't invented until the 4th day? Well, the answer is simple. The answer is extremely simple. When you go back to Exodus 13 and 21, it tells you about the cloud by day, by fire, and the cloud by night. So in the beginning, when what we call starships, or when the angelic construction workers came to create the earth, they threw on the floodlights of these particular starships, and that's what lit up the planet Earth. It's right there. The Bible is its own dictionary. So the same cloud, or the Anan in Hebrew, the fiery cloud, those are the same clouds that came down, which when you read in Genesis, the first chapter, it tell you about the chariots hovering over the waters. And that's what it was talking about. That's how the earth was lit up so that the angels can do whatever they were going to do on the planet Earth during the construction period. So when you read in Exodus 13:21, you will see that.
Right.
And that's where the whole story comes from about how was it like? It always was like. Every time you read about chariots of the Most High, it tell you about the chariots of fire. They always give off light. So that's where the whole light story come from. And many other ridiculous claims that they claim that they have absolutely no understanding of with regards to the whole creation story. First of all, the book of Genesis was a laconic overview, which was never meant to be taken as the sum total of the entire creation. And there's a whole lot of things that they just don't understand because they do not know how to link scriptures, because they don't follow scriptures. They don't believe in scriptures.
Right.
And that's the problem.
Right. My question would be, while Moreh is looking for something, my question to the Kemetic Armageddon Conference would be, can they point me to any period in Egyptian history, let's say more than 40 years, I'm going to give the 40-year barrier. Can they point me to any period in Egyptian history where the Egyptian people as a whole kept those principles of Ma'at? I'm talking about from the Nisut all the way down to the lowest Egyptian. Was there any point in their history where they kept Ma'at as a nation? Because we could point in the Bible to a period in our history during the time of Solomon where we were righteous as a whole. But the Bible, being a book that's not biased, will also tell you about when we were wicked. So I would ask them simply, can they point to any time? Because anywhere you go in Egyptian history, especially when you're dealing with the Nisuts, they were in violation of multiple principles of Ma'at at the same damn time. But this is not my interview. If you had something else to ask, yes. Moreh, what would you ask?
Why will they try to say Hosea 13 verse 4? Yet I am Yah thy power. I am the Lord thy God from the land of Egypt. And thou knowest no God but me. And besides me, there is no Savior. Now, they're trying to sit there and say that we got to remember that Israel was the one being spoken to. You got to know who is the speaker, who is being spoken to, and what the subject matter is being spoken about. So when it says, yet I am the Lord thy God from the land of Egypt, we already went over the fact that Yahweh was already noted as an enemy god inside the West Samara and the Soleb temples in the 18th dynasty. So let that be noted and understood. Now, in order to, as it says in Isaiah, line upon line, precept upon precept, you have to be able to go and know and show. You go to the book of Numbers, chapter 15, it says that the Most High brought you out of the land of Egypt, lihiyot lachem lelohim, to be to you a God, to be your God, to be your Elohim, to be your power. You see, when you go to Exodus chapter 6, verse 6 and 7, it tells you what? It says the Most High will bring Israel out of the land of Egypt, and he will be to them a God, and Israel will be to him a people. So you have to understand that kind of premise. Furthermore, it says what? And thou knowest no God but me. That's not an Egyptian concept, because like the brother pointed out, they had a duality of gods. This one and that one, this one and that one, and this and the Ennead, and this, that, and the third. So that's never going to be. You're never going to find Hathor saying don't deal with Sekhmet. You're not going to find that kind of thing. You will find Yahweh say don't deal with Baal. So this is something to be noted and pointed out in history. So when they try to go to Hosea 13 verse 4 and say that, oh, the Bible came out of Egypt, meanwhile, the God that this is talking about was considered the enemy God of Egypt. Get your understanding on point. Because when you go and read in the scriptures, it says wisdom will not enter a soul that's subject to sin. That's in the Apocrypha. So you have to have a certain kind of spiritual righteousness. Not saying we here are perfect, but you got to have some kind of spiritual righteousness to know and understand. You cannot teach that it's okay to sex a woman when she's on her menstrual. Everything's going to sit there and be all right. You can't sit there and teach that. You understand? That's the Tanakh. You cannot sit there and go and try to teach the concept that it's okay to eat anything you want, because ancient Kemet did not have a Leviticus 11 law. They ate ships, crabs, and lobsters. When you read about the record of Herodotus, they ate all kinds of things raw. They ate pork without any kind of judgment being placed upon them. Yes, Israel went against their laws, but Israel was judged upon their laws. That's why we always quote Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter. You see? So I'm gonna pass over to the brother Shaahl.
Yeah, you know, and while the brother Shaahl is looking for whatever he's looking for, you know, I gotta take my shots too. Oh, I gotta take my shots too. You know, oh shit, my battery got 15, so I'm gonna let you rock, Shaahl. But I gotta take my shots too. You know, real quick, man. Like another thing that I'd like to, you know, this is something I would ask Polite, because he made a big deal about child molestation, child molesting, right? Now, when you look at ancient Kemet, the life expectancy was like what, 30? Somewhere around there, give or take. It's about like 30. If that. So you know what age the girls were getting married if they were only expected to live to be 30? They were getting married at 12 years old in ancient Kemet. So how can you be then on record talking about child molestation when they were marrying little girls in Kemet? That's a fact. That'll be one of my questions. But go ahead, Shaahl, because time is running. You know, my battery's running low. Go ahead.
Well, you had pharaohs that married their own daughters.
Yeah.
So if they're gonna say that child molestation never existed in ancient Kemet, it's just totally false. And let's talk about why, like you would just to add to what you were saying earlier. Let's